In this module, we're going to look at bringing an image into Dynamo and then take data off of it so that we can actually create kind of these custom surfaces that I'm showing below. So the idea is we bring an image in, and preferably in black and white. We're going to measure density at any given area along the grid of the array of that image, and then take the numbers that we get off of how bright or dark it is and use that to drive shapes and or whether an object exists or doesn't exist in the data. So in the examples that we're going to work through, in the first one we actually create a three-dimensional shape based on the density of the component on the image. In the next one we take the density and make that drive the diameter of a dot. So we get this kind of a matrix of dots, which you could be using to create a frit pattern, a coating onto a glass surface in order to block sunlight and yet at the same time create visual interest. And in this final one, we're actually going to decide whether to place a glass panel or a solid panel and control the thickness of those panels based on that same data set. So to show you what it looks like in the code world, let me just slide over to another image here if I can. That must be the last image. So here's the overall definition. I know it's probably a little intimidating to look at first. There's a lot of elements that end up getting duplicated, like the solid panel and the glass panel are two identical definitions. The solid panel and the glass panel are basically the same definition repeated over. The output, the Revit, we've already done. The really new things we're going to do is the image processing and then some selection using digital logic in order to figure out whether we want to place something or not place something. So the first thing we're going to do though is let me just zoom in here and I'll just kind of show you how we get started. We're going to do the first two steps, and we're going to actually do the image processing. So we have controls that allow us to browse for the file, and then take that file and then convert it into something that the software Dynamo can actually read. And that image, by identifying it specifically as an image, putting that into an image to pixels, or an image input that understands pixels, should I say, based on a sampling across the surface of it. And then we'll get an output of color. And we're going to just change that color to a brightness value. Just so it's easier to manipulate the data. The color would be in RGB, so we'd have a lot of data. We're just going to go along with relative brightness. And then we do this thing to transpose it, because it just turns out that when we go through this, it turns the image 90 degrees for one reason that I don't quite understand. So that's the idea. We're going to build that next, the image processing. But we're also going to need to do a surface array, something else to map that same kind of a surface to map the objects that we want to create. So in the next clip, we'll get started with the image processing component of this.